So we're proud to bring you a presentation tonight. And this presentation is brought to you by the Los Alamos Department of Public Utilities, or DPU, as well as the Pajarito Environmental Education Center, or PEEC. I am Elizabeth Watts, and I work here at PEEC, and I will be the moderator. PEEC is a nonprofit organization that operates the Los Alamos Nature Center. Visit our website, peeknature.org, to learn more about visiting the Nature Center and our other upcoming events. I'd like to give a special shout out to PEEC's wonderful members, donors, and volunteers for your generous support. To learn more, visit our website, peeknature.org. Okay. All right, just a few logistics for this presentation before we get started. This talk is hybrid, which means there are some people here in our planetarium and some people tuning in over Zoom. For those tuning in on Zoom, please note you will not be able to see our presenter on the video, just the slides, which you should be able to see now. For questions, for those of you who are on Zoom, you can send me, the moderator, questions via the chat, and I will relay them to Ryan. And we will also take questions from in the planetarium, and we will do our best to repeat those for anyone who is on over Zoom. Okay, after this talk, you will receive a short evaluation and survey. I know we all tend to ignore surveys, but it would really, really help us out if you could take just a minute to fill out this short survey. It helps us improve future programs and know what people are interested in. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to email us. A bit about tonight's presenter. Ryan Ramaker is the Visitors Service Manager at PEEC, but he is much more. He's also very interested in conservation. He was born in the beautiful state of Washington and found his love of nature early. His mother was one of his biggest influences on his passion for learning and respect for nature. He's interested in hiking, biking, and bushcraft. This all came out of that connection. Ryan moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico in 2000, and there began his interest in the world of sustainable technology and restorative agriculture. He has taught classes at REI, built an outdoor equipment rental program, and worked to expand and maintain the Espanola Healing Foods Oasis. He is now the volunteer coordinator here at PEEC, and if you are interested in volunteering, it would make his job easier. So feel free to sign up. All right, with that, I am going to turn this over to Ryan and let him talk to us about water.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. My name is Ryan, as was stated earlier, and thank you everybody for coming tonight. I hope you get to learn something of interest. This is a deep passion for me. I've been in New Mexico for over 20 years, which is absolutely wild, longer than I was in my home state. And I just absolutely fell in love with this place. And part of the reason I fell in love with it is because it has a very special relationship with water. And so we're going to start out with a few very interesting facts about our beautiful state. If my slide clicker works, let's see if it does. Maybe not. Give me 1 second. There we go. Maybe I'll just do that. Yay, it's back. Okay. So, story of our water. New Mexico's water only covers approximately 0.2% of its landmass, which kind of blew my mind a little bit when I learned this. And that means that what we have here is extremely precious. And where we have access to it, how we have access to it, becomes something that should be almost a daily connection, because it is such a precious resource for us here. New Mexico is also at the top of the list for desertification. For anyone who does not know what that term means, essentially it's the process of, we have plant succession, which is essentially the process of how plants come into a space and grow from plants to shrubs to trees. And desertification is kind of the reverse of that process. It's when the land can no longer support the larger flora, and so it starts shrinking down and shrinking down and shrinking down, and we get more and more exposed earth. And so that's what that term is talking about here. And we are at the top of that list, unfortunately. But it also means we have a lot of different opportunities to learn about how to do things that other states and other spaces won't be focusing on. And I feel like if we can make some amazing changes in water here and how we use it and how we connect with it, then we're going to be rocking and rolling and being able to share all kinds of good stuff with other spaces. New Mexico is a high drought, fire, and flood risk state as well. We're seeing a lot of that the last few years with the increase in temperature that we're experiencing here. And clean water accessibility continues to decrease. And so water is a big topic for us here. And go ahead and head on to the next slide. I do tend to have a raspy and low voice, so if anyone has any problems hearing online, please just let us know and we can probably turn this up. Next slide here is a little bit of fun jokes about just kind of the playful way to get into some of these heavier topic spaces, right? And so I'm a big proponent of being and having fun with all of these things that we're learning, because I think when we're imbued with passion and we're imbued with excitement and joy about how much we can have a positive effect, the size of the problem can change. And I love turtles along with most reptiles and amphibians. And so I just thought that was a cutie right there. And actually, many years ago, I rescued one of these guys here in New Mexico. I believe that's a red-headed slider. So Elizabeth Watts, who is our moderator, has given some amazing resources already about a little bit about where Los Alamos specifically gets its water. And this is on our website in a little bit more detail, but I wanted to share it because it gives an overview of kind of where our water comes from. It comes from an aquifer, which is essentially groundwater, right? And these spaces between the rocks that turn into holding spaces for the water that we don't see on the surface, right? And this is another area of concern. Later in the presentation, we'll talk about how to start helping recharge some of these things by some of the practices we can do, and encourage also other folks to participate in. And this is a great picture of kind of our process here, right? And so our rain comes in, it slides down, and then when it can sit here long enough and doesn't just get washed down because we don't have enough vegetation or enough healthy soil to hold and soak in that water, it can start to recharge these things. Thank you to Lionel for this picture here. On to our next slide. So we're going to talk about a couple of different areas. One of the first areas we'll start with is essentially kind of home solutions and being able to connect into ways to do audits of our own spaces indoors. And then as we move through the presentation, we'll talk about different ways we can do this and benefit our spaces outdoors. And so this is the first quick one here. Simple actions we can take. There's a kind of more comprehensive list coming up, but this is a great way to start doing some tracking of your water in your own home. There's a connection here to the ladpu.com/step 1, and it takes about 10 minutes to do this challenge. Have your bill with you because it will ask for some information regarding your account and whatnot, but then it gets started and it helps essentially track leaks and periods of time that have a higher usage of water. So it's a really great first step towards the right direction regarding saving and conserving our water usage. All right, this is the extended list. And so this is a lot of fun. I always like to do my best to share information, but we have kiddos at the house and we like to do checklists and things like that. And this is a great way to kind of go through and see if you're on the right path, so to speak. And there's 3 kind of key areas here in the house that are pretty connected to water. One is the kitchen. The second one is the bathroom. and the other one is the laundry. Now, I'm a big proponent of change, but I also am, full-time working guy. And so knowing that you can't really take on big projects all the time, picking one or two out of these to start is also a recommendation, right? We don't need to go in and do everything all at once, because then we're going to maybe burn ourselves out. And so I'm going to read through these and kind of give a little talk about the importance of each one and why they're up here. Run full dishwasher loads, that also kind of ties into run full laundry loads, which is on the laundry side. And this is just maximizing the efficiency of the water use, right? We can go and buy these amazing new appliances that have higher efficiencies. But if we're just throwing one or two pieces of clothes in there at a time, it really kind of defeats the purpose of that process. We have reused cooking water and gray water usage, which there's some great resources on. And gray water is kind of its own topic. So if you get curious about that, do some research. It has to be done in a specific way, but I'll give you all an idea of what gray water is. Gray water is typically, so there's just potable water, gray water, and then black water. At least this is my understanding of it. And since potable water is all the stuff that we can drink and use in our regular spaces, gray water typically comes from things like our tub, our sinks, and our laundry, because it has different types of contaminants in it, but they're usually biodegradable contaminants. And I should say maybe non-toxic biodegradable contaminants. And so some folks will essentially have systems set up where their water from those sources, the bathtub, the sink, and even the laundry, especially if you use the right soaps, will then drain out into their yard or grass areas or garden or whatever they might have. But because, especially with the sink in particular, it has so much food debris and fats often, there usually needs to be a medium to break that up before it can be processed back into the soils. And so there's a learning curve with the gray water, but reusing your cooking water, or even just taking, if you say we have chickens, and so we boil a whole bunch of eggs, and I'll take that boiled egg water once it cools down and just walk it out to the garden bed and pour it in the garden bed instead of just pouring it down the drain. And so there's some really great ways to do that. Soaking dishes overnight just speeds up the process and makes it so that your dishwasher doesn't have to do as much work. Composting is another big one. When you have bigger scraps on your plates, you can scrape them into the compost, and then it goes out to feed the little worms and the little microorganisms that live in our soil. And so that's a great process as well. Turning off the water when you're not using is definitely one that I had to get out of the habit of, coming from Washington originally. Water was not as big a concern for me in that space, although it should be everywhere we go. But I was very used to just leaving that water on while I was brushing my teeth. And here I definitely have gotten in the habit, slowly but surely, of turning that off. I'll kind of jump around to some of the key ones because I don't want to spend too much time here. This is not the most fascinating slide in the world. Only flush when necessary. We've all heard that rhyme. If it's brown, flush it down. If it's yellow, let it mellow. That's a beautiful way to think about it here in New Mexico. There's also some really cool things that you can do to put into essentially the back part of your tank that take up volume. And so when you flush, you're not flushing as much water down as you would otherwise. High efficiency toilets is another way to get to that same process. And then checking for leaks regularly. Let's see if there's anything up. Oh, my favorite one here, because one thing that we definitely have in abundance here in New Mexico is sunshine. And so being able to hang your clothes up outside when you can is a great way to save water and not to use as much energy as well. All right, let's get to the next one. This was the outdoor piece, and I'm definitely working very hard. Here in Los Alamos, we definitely have some older buildings and older houses, and so the housing portion is really important. But my passion piece definitely comes into this area here outside. I think that I've definitely always just really loved being able to make my spaces better, not only for myself, but also for all those around me, including wildlife. And so these areas are kind of some key areas of focus. So harvesting rainwater and stormwater And I'd like to make the distinction between the two because this is something that I had to learn along the way. Rainwater is anything that has not hit the ground yet. So if it hits your roof first and then goes into your tank, that would be considered rainwater. If it's coming off, I mean, even the top of your car, the minute it hits the ground, it turns into what's referred to as stormwater. And stormwater can have some different things to consider because a lot of times they'll be coming off streets or roads, and roads hold oil, they hold other things that are coming from the car. And so several of the areas where I had the pleasure of working used drainage from local parking lots, which was a great way to gather water from those spaces. They just had a natural slope in the parking lot. It fed down into an area, but they had to build in some things to essentially pre-filter that water, especially since it was going into an area where there was food-based products being grown. And there's some great mushrooms that are capable of actually pulling things like oils out of the ground. And so they did some bioremediation with actually technically mycology, micro-remediation using mushrooms to help pre-filter that water. It's an incredible process. When we're picking plants, we're going to want to pick native and drought-tolerant plants, which is critical. We have some amazing displays of that actually out in our front area here. Natalie Steinberg has made, actually along with Larry Deven, have made some really beautiful spaces out in front of PEEC that have some great ideas for how to pick them, which ones to use. They're also really, really connected to a lot of the pollinators that come through our areas, which just helps the entire ecosystem, which is fantastic. No lawns, rewild your spaces. So this is definitely one that, especially here in New Mexico, is something that I definitely like to call out. So lawns and monocultures are really require a lot of extra water, especially if we want them to stay that nice, pretty green. And they essentially allow for a lot of water usage, and they allow for a lot of water evaporation. And by rewilding your spaces, which is a process we'll talk about a little bit later on, you can mitigate that process. And it looks a little bit different than some folks really want, right, or are used to. But once you get used to it, it's so beautiful, and you can make some amazing spaces using some of these techniques. Use water-free cleaning tools for outdoor tidying. Instead of spraying things off with water, if you can use brushes or brooms or towels to wipe things down before you start using water, definitely take that work. Use earthworks to create more space and opportunity for plant succession. Earthworks is a process of essentially changing how water can stay and sit in your spaces by changing the shape of the earth by building or making steps or removing and making kind of convex shapes to catch and hold water. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. And then we're going to do increased soil health by mulching and leaving leaves be. And then I have Bee City here because Los Alamos is currently in the process of trying to become a bee city, which is super cool. Bee cities are places where the city has taken a pledge to not participate in certain things regarding pesticides and other processes that allow pollinators to have more natural spaces, which is awesome. So in our backyards, up here are a couple of websites to go check out and different options to kind of take a look at just how profound the amount of water you can get from using rain catchment is. I was kind of blown away, in all honesty, by how much I was able to. Our house is a unique house in the sense that it doesn't have any gutters on it currently, and we just have spots where it naturally runs off the roof. And thus far, I've used totes, but I've managed to collect, on average, in a rain event like we've had the last couple of days, probably about 150 gallons if I have all the totes out, which is substantial. And that's not going into the totes that we have. That's just using some silly buckets. The neighbors probably think I'm a weirdo, but that's okay. I'm okay with that as long as I'm saving some water. Here actually are some pictures from my backyard, and then this one here on all the way to your right is actually what it would look like if we had the ability to pipe it directly in from the gutters. But these two here on the left are two versions of what I've set up here. I got these IBC totes, food grade, actually off of, I think it was eBay. eBay, no, it was, sorry, Craigslist. And I got them delivered. So they're 300 gallons each. And we have roughly $600 gallons of, I wish it was $600, 600 gallons of water that we can use for irrigation purposes. We can use for watering. We can use for all kinds of fun stuff. And then this is another one that I got, I think off of either Free Los Alamos or a Facebook group. And I have this under our shed area. And so I collect water not only from the dripping roof into the barrel itself, but also into a barrel or a little tin next to it. And then I'll dump that into the barrel. And I use this to water one of our bigger trees and then also our apricot tree. And it works exceptionally well now that it is set up. You have to elevate it a little bit. So you're using gravity as the pump, but then it's just got a little hose. You take the hose to where you want to go and you turn the knob, and then all of a sudden you're just watering your plants. And it gives a nice, here in New Mexico, the style of watering should be kind of, that's why when we're talking about irrigation, we want to do drip irrigation, Drip irrigation will get more of a deep saturation happening. When we do the spray watering, it gets there's a lot of evaporation that happens not only in the moment, but it doesn't have enough time to sit and sink down into the soil. And so it gets a secondary set of evaporation that takes place, and we just lose more water than we do if we do a nice slow soak with something like this and just allow it to really get down into the soil. I will also share timing wise, right? This is about 2 years of project. And so this took some time. This is something that I went out. Accessibility is another big piece of my puzzle. And I really know that not everyone has the budget to go out and just make a big sweeping change in their home, in their backyard, anywhere else. And so these, even though the sum total of their cost was probably about $300, it took me about 2 years to kind of whittle that time out and that the ability to get those and put them in place. And so slow and steady still is a great way to get there. Is it illegal to collect rainwater in New Mexico? You can read this slide here. The answer is no, but I was surprised actually at how often I heard that people thought that the answer was yes. And I actually had to go to several different places to find this. And currently, all things say that it is legal to do so, because I do know there are some states where it is not. And you essentially just have to make sure that it's done cleanly, safely. And if you're going to have it connect back into any other sources of water that are associated with the house directly, you have to follow the regulations of the plumbing code, which I don't know, so I don't do that. And then here we have our local New Mexico rule number 8. So this is very relevant to everyone here in Los Alamos, I should say. And if you are in any of these spaces, so there's the time essentially, and the different bits and pieces here regarding when you should be doing your watering. So mornings, evenings, when the sun is not out. And so if you are doing watering, that's the best time to do it because you're going to have the least amount of evaporation take place. And then alternating days here as well. I believe this is the most current data. It should be. And then we also have actually outside in the front, for those of you who came, there's little magnets that have the same schedule. And so if you don't want to remember it or memorize it, grab one of those magnets, throw it on your fridge, and you'll always have that information ready for you to go. All right. Low cost outdoor water resilience. So here's some more things that are offered that are essentially free to anyone who would like to partake in them, and $3.99, as I like to say. It's a great number, great cost, and some more stuff that's really, really connected to our local resources here in Los Alamos. How to get started. Now, this is something that I like to talk a lot about, and if you ever see me in person, finding sustainable processes is critical. I'm someone who has a disability, and so being able to manage that disability along with some other things has taught me a lot about how to process or create processes that are sustainable. And I think that small, simple steps is one of my favorite ways to get things going. Pick something, anything you learned tonight that calls to your heart or your head or anything that you're passionate about, and take that first small, easy, simple step that you can't fail at, and you get that first really important win, and then you can continue on. And I like to call out these three separate areas here. So we have water conservation, water restoration in areas of essentially restoration to help with water conservation, and then water preservation as well, which is tying into really making sure that our spaces are not overly utilized for the wrong purposes, I should say. And so there's a lot of layers to this process. All right. Responsibility and moving the cultural needle. Why is this important? I think that the more people who get excited about, this is definitely a topic that sometimes people are either really excited about or just really don't care about. I'm definitely one of those people who's very excited about it. But really creating a culture where things are talked about, curiosity is brought back into the conversation, and really knowing that, especially in the state of New Mexico, really connecting into our water in a way that is maybe more relationship-based instead of transactional-based is probably a great way to move this cultural needle, to make sure that we're sharing this in a way that connects to not only us right now, but also with our future generations, right? This is not just a now problem. This is a rolling forward problem. And the more we build spaces, the more we build cultures, the more we build curiosity around these things, the more we can have that deep, rich cultural shift towards caring about this in a way that will make a big difference in the long run. How to make it fun, connect with local groups. We have a staggering amount of local groups who are interested in conservation of all kinds. And when you're interested in any kind of outdoor conservation, eventually it'll tie back to water and how critical it is. And here's just a few of these resources to PEEC where you are right now. The DPU Education Spaces, LASA, which is the Los Alamos Sustainability Alliance, LAB City, which is a Facebook group, the Los Alamos Environmental Sustainability Board, the LA Master Gardeners, and Xerxes Society is another great one. And all of these kind of go into some different areas, but when you kind of get to their meat and potatoes, or I should say, you get to the meat and potatoes of it, they're all going to show you different processes of interacting with the environment that give a net benefit. And when we create spaces that are healthy, we create spaces that can consume and hold water. Microclimates and their role in water resiliency. So I talked a little bit about this earlier in terms of some different techniques in order how to get there. So soil health, earthworks, water catchment, plant succession, and urban planning. And then remember, if you like the conditions outside, more than likely everybody else does. This is something that has really struck me this year. And I don't know if all of you, maybe some folks have liked it, but we have had an unprecedented heat wave through the entire world at this point, right? And so having spaces that have all kinds of opportunity for the regeneration of green, anything green is more and more critical, right? Not only is it drawing down carbon from the sky or the atmosphere, I should say, but it's also giving us shade, which is amazing during hot times. And it cuts down, the more trees we have, the more shade we have over our house. We don't have to use as much electricity, so forth and so on. And this beautiful cycle of being comfortable comes into play. So the otter was just too cute not to throw in here. This is actually a picture of my front yard. And so this is another option that I like to throw out there to folks, especially during the rewilding process. We definitely have, it's nice to let your neighbors know what you're doing and why you're doing it, and has some purpose. And so this is a process that you can go through here at the National Wildlife Federation. I think that's right, Federation or Foundation. The link is up there and you can get certified. It's pretty inexpensive in all honesty, but it's just a great thing to do. And it's a great thing. Yeah, that is a process. Yep. Oh, yep. Sorry. Thank you for that reminder, Elizabeth. The question was for those of you who are on Zoom, is how do you control the invasive species of plants that come through? And I was sharing that it's a bit of a process. And so my yard is definitely not, like magically completely clear of these things. But essentially what you're trying to do is go through, weed what you can by hand, right? Because this is more about our own home spaces. Weed what you can by hand. And then when you go back, there's some amazing places. So in Santa Fe, there's the Plants of the Southwest that has a native grass mix, right? And so I went and got some of that for our yard as well, and making sure that I'm just going back into those places that I weeded and giving more chance for native plants to come back in. And it takes time, right? And so there's you can do some pretty aggressive things like just tilling the whole thing, but you're still going to eventually get those weeds back. And unfortunately, when you till the whole thing, you're also mixing up those all the existing life that's in the soil gets churned up and then gets cooked, and then you don't have as much life in the soil. And the whole point is to put life back into the soil, to create this amazing process that turns soil from kind of this hard cap stuff that we can see in a lot of different locations in New Mexico, to healthier soil that can actually absorb water once it hits it and not just roll off the top, right? Biomimicry, this is actually I learned about this term maybe 5 years ago, and is coming up more and more and more in how we solve problems. And so the concept is letting nature lead. Nature's been doing and solving so many of our problems for so long that a lot of times we can amplify or even use as a model what nature is doing to solve problems in our own approach to dealing with things. And so these are some of the questions I like to ask when I'm going up to kind of change something about my space in the backyard. What is the goal, and how does nature move that process forward? What is the problem? Like what are the obstacles from me moving this soil and moving these bits and pieces of my water use to higher levels of efficiency? How can I feed that cycle? And then what do I learn? What's the message that I can bring back to the people that are also passionate about this process? And how does that cycle function short-term, long-term, and then generationally? And this is also something that I definitely was really awakened by this process. Some of the processes that it takes to really start rebuilding systems that can help and hold water take 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, right? And that process to me felt really daunting at the beginning. But then I was like, well, like I'm still making my spaces more beautiful in the process. And I know for a fact that I've done something that's going to help take care of my kiddos and other people who are going to be here. So this is a fun little fact about the power of and why I've been talking a lot about soil in this process. So that is, did you know for each 1% increase in organic matter, and definition of organic matter is essentially anything that is on top of the soil that is dark and rich and kind of malleable. There's a cleaner definition for that, but it's actually essentially talking about that top layer of really rich, dark soil on the top. And so increase in organic matter, the U.S. cropland could store the amount of water that flows over Niagara Falls in 150 days. Soil is one of our biggest tools for water conservation. It's tremendous at doing things like holding water, holding carbon, and also creating a process where we're recharging our groundwater and creating more opportunity for plant succession, which means we're creating more opportunity for native rebound. We're creating more opportunity for essentially fun things like putting trees back in, putting shrubs back in, and really having that shift from open spaces where we're getting cooked, right? Because we don't have any shade, we don't have any top cover. And, you know, New Mexico is not inherently that way anyways, but there's definitely areas where we've seen a tremendous impact from fires and other bits and pieces, and also impacts from desertification and the flood process. And this process unfortunately kind of feeds itself, right? And so we want to stop it and halt it as much as we can. Fire season support. We all had a very interesting season last season. Thank goodness so far this season has not been as crazy, although we did end up with some fires. But when we have healthier soils and we have more access to water staying in the soils and also in the plant life, we reduce the risk of fires coming into our towns and into our spaces and affecting our homes. And so it has an immediate buffering zone. There's actually entire classes taught on how to essentially arrange fire tolerant plants, which some are more than others, in ways around your perimeter and property to help mitigate if you are in high fire areas, to control that and help protect your spaces. So there's a lot of amazing information around how powerful this is. And again, this is all about keeping that water here and not letting it escape and go someplace else. This here is one of the first pictures of kind of what I love to refer to as my favorite fixes, simple fixes. These are things that only require a little bit of effort and some kind of imagination and patience and also experimentation. So I guess there's a lot of things in this mix, but it's a lot of fun. Swales, buns, gabions, and oyas. And so these are some really, really great ways of slowing water down in our spaces. We have, if we go and we look out when we have water events like the rain we just actually had tonight and yesterday, which have been amazing. Thank you, rain. What happens is we reach essentially a tolerance point for saturation, right? And so once the ground is soaked up as much as it can, it just lets it sheet off, right? And also cities are built this way because we don't want our roadways and our houses flooding as well. But these are specific things that you can do in your own spaces to when we have these kind of water events, to actually slow that water down in your space and have it soak into the ground instead of sheeting off. And we want to do this in areas that we want to have growth and other bits and pieces in. And so the swale, it's kind of hard to see well on this one, but essentially what it is on a slope, you're going to dig down a little bit and then take the soil that you remove from the ditching area and mound it. And then you're going to start putting plants and some bigger trees on the mound portion. And what will happen is when it rains, it'll collect and roll down naturally with gravity, but instead of just continuing to roll off, it'll collect in that area. And then the plants that you planted in the mounded area will be able to draw that in that water when it needs to, and it gets much deeper. And with the different kinds of plants we have here, it draws that water to different depths. Different roots and different root systems can draw water deeper than others. And so it's an amazing system that we see kind of happen naturally. In places like Africa, they're actually using things called buns, which are up in this corner here to the right. They're little essentially crescent-shaped dig-outs, and they'll go and do these on kind of floodplain areas. And what will happen is when the water comes through, it'll take and kind of collect debris in these little mounds, and slowly but surely they'll start to grow enough vegetation to start drawing water down back into the ground again. Gabions are essentially a step version of this. And oyas are one of my favorite things ever. Oyas are glazed pots that have a top that you can pour water in and a closed bottom, and you can make them out of all kinds of stuff that's not some people use, like, actually it's going to be what I use because I'm experimenting with them, is the pots or the clay pots that you usually use for potting plants. You cork one end, cover that up, and then you leave the top open, and then you seal two of them together at the wide portion. I think I may have a picture in here. We'll find out. And once you do that, you bury that next to an area where you want to have a kind of a reservoir, a natural reservoir of water. And then you pour water into the top, and it slowly leaches out of that pot. And it allows that slower saturation, and it allows the plants to have an area to send their roots to get kind of a steady flow of water instead of that fleeting water they get at the surface. Low cost outdoor water resiliency. Checking time here real quick. Build a different relationship with the water you use. To me, this ties back into the power of water, right? We're very used to going to the sink, turning it on, and it's there, and turning it off, and then it's gone. But that's not actually where our water comes from, and reminding ourselves that there's a very complex natural process in play, and our state has very little of it. Is a good reminder. So use earthworks first, water, then shade, then plant succession. This is a great way to start rehabilitating your areas, great way to start utilizing the water you collect. And it's just a phenomenal, easy set of steps to remember in order to really start changing the landscape for the positive. Make use of seed libraries. PEEC has one now that we're building up slowly but surely. The Mesa Library has one, and Espanola Library has one. This also gives access to some native plants and native hardy plants, which we want to use as many of those as we can, or I should say native drought-tolerant plants. Visit Los Alamos White Rock reuse spaces. And so we have one here in Los Alamos, and we have another one down in White Rock now that just opened up, I think maybe a month, 2 months ago. I've already gotten some amazing things for those spaces. They're awesome. Go check them out. I got a push lawnmower, and I got essentially a worm bin for vermiculture and using worms to help support the soil as well. Get mulch from the Los Alamos Eco Station. This is another big one. Mulch is phenomenal at essentially covering the water that we put down. So when you put your mulch down and then you water, well, all those different like nooks and crannies prevent massive amounts of evaporation, and it holds that water in. It's kind of like down. You know how down has those little, creates all those little spaces. That's why it collects warmth so well. Well, mulch does the same thing, and it collects and holds water really well. And then have fun and be creative. This is one of those things where the more you start to see your space beauty up, and the more you're like, ooh, I can take the water from my roof, and now I can have this beautiful, vegetable garden, and I don't have to use any more of my tap water to do that. It's a great experience, and it really kind of connects you into this beautiful process of nature. All right, short-term and long-term commitment. So this is a statistic from the Mayo Clinic, and I threw this in here because I definitely love to kind of connect things to us personally, right? Now, this is an average, so definitely take that into account. But essentially what it's saying is that the average person in a like desert climate, which we are, so you can add some volume to this, needs, for men, they need about 3.7 liters of fluid a day, and for women, they need about 2.7 liters. And so I'm just going to, for the sake of this kind of moment of connection, round up to a gallon, right? We use, let's say, I think if I'm remembering the statistic correctly, washing our efficient dishwashers take 45 gallons of water for one cycle. Might be less than that. We'll even dump it down to 25 gallons of water. If it takes a gallon of water to keep a person alive for a day, that means the one time running that cycle is 25 days of life for a person. That's incredible. And we don't even think about it, right? Water is such a powerful piece of us, and it's so critical to life in general. And so if you can remember every time you turn on that tap, every time you run that thing, every time you get an opportunity to create an efficiency in your process and connection to water, you're having a net and positive impact on this life-giving substance. How's everybody doing? Like I said, my voice can put people to sleep, so I'm just checking in. Plus, these two cuties here are doing some checking in for me. All right, so we're going to move on to urban planning and sustainability. We have some amazing people in Los Alamos, and this manager of sustainability, Angelica Goulet, is a great resource for bits and pieces here. She's also connected to the LASA, which is the Los Alamos Sustainability Association, and a great resource for talking to you about things. And then also here, we have in our audience, and I hope that I spelled your name correctly, Abby. Did I? Yes, nailed it. Fantastic. She's here this evening, and she's going to be giving this talk here coming up, September 21st. And it is going to be kind of all this and way, way, way more, which is super cool. And she knows a ton about this stuff. And it's super exciting to have access to people who are willing to share this knowledge with us. So if you feel like coming back, if you learn something from this, please come and check this out as well. All right. Share your success. So this is actually me giving a thumbs up here next to my water thing here, and a very cute frog doing some photography. When we get excited about things and we bring them out into the world, other people get excited about them too. And so here's some just fun, silly things you can do. If you ever get into this and you get excited about something you've done, please tag PEEC and reference some of these things. You can tag a lot of different other groups if you have social media. Not everybody does, so no big deal. Show and tell with family and friends. Word of mouth really does work. Share the benefits and joy of your experience. Outside is a healing and beautiful place, and knowing that you've gone out into your own space and help that space heal and grow is a great thing for the soul, for the mind, for the experience that we all share here on this planet. And so definitely share those moments with the people you care about. Lend your knowledge and resources. Until recently didn't have I did a lot of renting, right? And that's another piece around this water conservation. We have a lot of people who rent places, and sometimes they don't have access to simple solutions or whatever. But if you have knowledge and you have resources, share with everybody who might need it, right? When picking vegetation, so actually prior to this, probably about 2 weeks ago, there was another event, and I had a woman ask about picking plants, right? And so for this process, this to me could be an entire class, an entire talk. This is a tremendous subject. And so I didn't want to go too deep into this with the time that I have, because we're getting close to the end anyways. But I wanted to give some things to really look for in this process, right? We want to do drought tolerant, native and non-invasive species, annual and perennial options. This becomes definitely critical when you're trying to foster an entire ecosystem. Ground cover and cover crops. This is another way of protecting that soil and letting it hold on to the water that we put there. Bloom throughout the season. This is another great one too. So plants are drawing different nutrients and different things from the soil during different times of the year. Not only is having these plants do and go through their life cycles in different periods, but also different color varieties, which is the second one there, helps with pollinators, helps with all kinds of great things. And it also just means that there's more activity in the soil for a longer period of time. And when that happens, that soil again is able to maintain moisture and hold on to moisture for a longer period of time. And so our water efficiency goes way up. And then diversity equals stability and sustainability. And this is one of my my favorite pieces here. Like when we think of anything, like massive corn crops, massive other crops, they have to have a lot of things put on them in order to deal with pests, which could be its own other topic. We tend to see problems with pests and other pieces of things that are detrimental to this process decrease, not go away, but decrease when we have a higher level of diversity in the ecosystem. All right, so these are some local call outs to Los Alamos specifically. We have a picture of the front of PEEC here. This is actually a beautiful art installation slash water harvesting process here, and this helps water some of our spaces out in front of PEEC. We have the co-op park, which this picture doesn't really give it justice as far as some of the things that it's done, but it was the best picture I had that called out the space itself. You can go there and there's a little garden area, but they've also done some great things where they have drainage pipes that go, or essentially drainage areas that go into essentially feeding that space, right? And so it catches water and does a really good job of that. And then we have these lovely hanging garden beds that are fed by the water here. Now, I don't know the origin of where this water comes from, but I appreciate these because they're a very fun example of drip irrigation, right? And so essentially that tube goes down, it's very close to the soil and it drips. Do they overflow sometimes? Sure. But this is a very beautiful and creative way to have some, and you can see they're very happy. And that's what happens when you get that water really close to the soil and let it saturate into those spaces. And these are all along the main strip. So if you've never really taken time to go peek at them, they're really beautiful. Water Conservation Inspiration. Tewa Women United is a place that I worked for before coming to PEEC, and they're an incredible nonprofit as well. And here are some links and connections to some of the work that they do around food and water restoration. And I learned a ton from working with them regarding how to use, utilize, and connect in with water in a way that was really, really, really beautiful. And was practical and very connecting. And then Brad Lancaster is a gentleman who I discovered who's doing a lot of not only amazing work around how to do urban changes in actually Arizona, if I remember correctly. I think it's in Phoenix too, so it's a big city. But he really has he showed his neighbors how amazing it would be if they followed some of these principles, and they saw and they loved it, and it spread. And so now there's this massive, beautiful community that practices a lot of these principles. And this is the book that he wrote, harvestingrainwater.com is his link. And then he did a book. And I think I have the link to the book here a little bit. There's another YouTube link that I have as well. But if you are interested in seeing what happens when you move that cultural needle, that social needle, he's a great place to look for that. Oh, here it is. Sweet. It's on the next slide. And so Kristen Dickerson, yeah, did this essentially documentary on him and his work. And the link is down there at the bottom. Feel free to take a picture of that, or you can just kind of go to YouTube and type in dryland harvesting, home gatherers, sun, rain, food, and more. And it'll bring you to this lady's amazing documentary. And it's definitely worth watching. It's about, I think it's 57 minutes. So it's a good chunk, but it's incredible start to finish. And it is super inspirational. And a great way to start looking at urban water sequestration and utilization instead of just having all of our water run down to the streets and go to places where we can't use it for a second time. International examples. I actually love this because this to me is the epitome of not only biomimicry, but also curiosity. Some of the statistics on these are called the Warka water towers, and they come in tons of different sizes and shapes, and they're part of this process that is growing in popularity in desert spaces and high altitude spaces of essentially collecting the water particulates that form when we have a change in temperature, right? Condensation. And so they are erected in spaces, and they have this incredibly specific micro mesh that goes in the middle. And when you have fluctuations in temperature, the water or the condensation collects, it drains down into the middle and then can be harvested. And once it's there, there's no power associated with it. There's just maintenance and collecting the rainwater. And you can have ones that have a drain off directly into the soil. You have ones that you can go and collect from. It's pretty cool. I don't know a tremendous amount about how much these things cost, where they're being implemented, but I just really love them. And so when you get curious about some fun stuff too, there's also a process in higher altitude places called fog harvesting, where they're taking a similar principle, but instead of having the cylinder space, they just have these long running tracks of mesh that collect the condensation and dew that forms. It drains down into a metal collection like tubing, and then that drains into a centralized collection spout. And so it's bringing water, fresh water, really, really clean water actually, to a lot of places that would not otherwise have access to them. Connecting with the community and those who share passion. This is, I think they just ended the one in July or whatever it is, and I think they may have started another one. But this is just a fun pledge you can go check out if you want something. Some people like to have a task, and so I wanted to include this in there as a thing you can do and kind of go check out. This is just a reminder that we live in a space that is pretty still wild, and everything we do not only impacts us, impacts our kids, our surroundings, our environment, but it also has a tremendous impact on our friends here. And this actually is a monarch from one of the monarchs that we released in this whale, just reminding us that we can be noisy and silly and definitely not the kindest to water in general. Oceans is a whole nother subject, but remember that we can definitely have some pretty potent unintended impacts on all things around us, both beneficially and negatively. And I hope that as we get there, I'm at 8. Wow, that happened fast. As we kind of get more and more in tune with these processes, that we can see the net benefit impact that we have on the environment here. Time and money. I like to throw this one in here because I think it's important to remember again that not everyone who sees this and not everyone has the ability to take action has a whole lot of resources. And so anytime we can make this process easier on ourselves, but anytime we can also let folks know who have a lot less than we do, that there are ways that they can also improve their spaces that don't have a tremendous cost is important. Word of mouth. It really works. It really does. And I really appreciate everyone who has come here tonight. And I really appreciate any bit of this that you take home with you and it sticks with you, and any bit of this that you take home with you and you share with others. Here's the resource list. Another one, feel free to take a snapshot of that. Again, this is being recorded, so you'll be able to see it once it's uploaded. But these are just some different areas, different areas of interest regarding all of these different processes related to kind of this holistic approach to water conservation. And then lastly is this beautiful slide here. Oh, did you get that picture in time? No, here, I'll go back. All right, thank you, everybody. Is there any questions? Correct. Yep. There, at the dump in Los Alamos or the eco station in Los Alamos, It's transfer station. Thank you very much. It's located just kind of around the back, and it's a little area. And then there's a whole big place for it. This really cool covered shed down in White Rock. Yep. The question was about the reuse stations. Sorry, I'll get used to that someday.
All right. Thank you for that, Ryan. We had one question so far come in through the chat. It was earlier, but someone was curious about when you talked about gray water.
Yes.
They wanted to know, because they said they thought gray water was illegal to use.
So in some spaces, yes. If done properly, I believe the answer again in New Mexico is it is not. We actually have some resources here at PEEC around that whole process. And so I will continue to gather some information and double check that that is indeed a yes, but we have actually a really cool booklet about that whole process here. And so if they would like to come by and pick that up, definitely come by and pick that up.
All right. Do we have any other questions? All right. Well, I don't see any other questions come in over text. Then I will say thank you to Ryan again. As he said, word of mouth works, and it's his enthusiasm has definitely affected me, and I just enjoyed learning from him about all these different topics. Next Thursday, we will have a second talk on sort of like getting things ready for winter and things about changing your outdoor space. And that will be, again, a hybrid talk here at PEEC and on Zoom. And just one more plug to please fill out the quick survey that you get after this program. If there are no further questions, we will sign off, and thank you again for coming tonight.
Thank you, everybody.